Elena's impeccable revenge, the Silvera sting. Before we start, if you believe in justice served cold, hit the subscribe button and like this video to fuel Elena's power move. The shocking hook picture. The scene. The most exclusive charity gala in London's Mayfair. 300 members of the high society elite, and a powerful tycoon, Marcus Harrington, who believes he has executed the perfect, flawless deception against his wife. But his wife, Eleanor Silvera, discovered everything 6 months ago, and tonight, she didn't come just to dance. What unfolded on that stage was so devastating, so precisely calculated, it became a whispered legend in the London social scene. This is the true story of how one woman transformed her greatest humiliation into the most elegant, unforgiving revenge ever witnessed. The ticking clock. Marcus Harrington adjusted his bow tie for the 3rd time in front of the Venetian mirror in his executive suite. The reflection staring back was that of a 50-year-old man at the zenith of success. Perfectly groomed silver hair, an impeccable Savile Row suit, and a smile that had secured dozens of multi-million-pound contracts. But today, something different flickered in his dark eyes, an anxiety he rarely allowed to show. The Hope Foundation Gala was the most important social event of the year in London. Tycoons, politicians, celebrities, and the aristocracy would convene at the luxurious Langham Hotel. Marcus had sponsored the event for the last 5 years, always accompanied by Eleanor, his wife of 22 years. But this year would be different. His fingers delicately touched the gold-embossed invitation on his mahogany desk. 2 invitations, actually. One addressed to Mayor Marcus Harrington and Ms. Eleanor Harrington. The other simply to Marcus Harrington and guest. The second had arrived discreetly via his private secretary with a handwritten note that read only, "So we can finally make our union official before society. With love, Serafina." Serafina Hayes. The name resonated in his mind like a seductive melody. At 32, she was everything Eleanor had ceased to be. Vibrant, passionate, full of dreams and ambition. The head of marketing for a rival firm. She had entered his life 6 months prior during a business conference in Manchester. What began as professional attraction quickly transformed into something far more dangerous and overwhelming. Marcus remembered that first encounter vividly. Serafina had aggressively challenged his strategies during a panel, forcing him to defend his viewpoints with a passion he hadn't felt in years. After the event, she approached him to apologize, but in her emerald eyes, he saw not regret, but defiance. They dined together that night, and Marcus realized it had been decades since he had spoken to someone who truly stimulated him intellectually. Eleanor, on the other hand, had settled into the role of a high society wife. Her days were consumed by charity luncheons, spa sessions, and overseeing the renovations of their country house in Cotswolds. Their conversations revolved around social gossip and complaints about the staff. The love they once shared had dissolved into a cordial domestic coexistence, interrupted only by discussions about investments and social commitments. The phone rang, disrupting his thoughts. It was Serafina, my love. Her voice had that velvety quality that always made him forget where he was. "Are you ready for our big night?" "Serafina, we need to talk about this." Marcus hesitated, glancing at the framed photo on his desk, where Eleanor smiled beside him during a trip to Paris the previous year. "I'm not sure if now is the right time to—" She interrupted him, gently, but firmly. "We talked about this yesterday, and last week, and last month. You said you were tired of living a lie, that you wanted to assume our relationship publicly. You were the one who suggested I accompany you to the ball." It was true. During a moment of passion in her sleek London apartment, After a particularly harsh argument with Eleanor about his constant absence from home, Marcus had declared he was ready to end the marriage and start a new life. Serafina had glowed with joy, talking about how they could finally be happy together without needing to hide. But now, with the ball just 2 hours away, reality was knocking on his door like an unpaid bill. Eleanor wasn't just his wife. She was a shareholder in the company. His lawyers had already made it clear that a divorce could be financially catastrophic. Furthermore, Eleanor came from one of London's most traditional families, the Silveras, whose political and social clout had opened many doors for his businesses over the years. "Are you picking me up at 8? Serafina's voice brought him back to the present. "Of course," he replied, his voice sounding more confident than he felt. "Wear the navy dress we bought in Paris. You'll be stunning." After hanging up, Marcus walked over to the window of his 22nd floor office. The city of London stretched out before him, a sea of lights beginning to twinkle as night approached. Somewhere down there, Eleanor was getting ready in their penthouse suite, where she had spent the afternoon at one of the city's most exclusive spas. She had mentioned at breakfast that she would wear the custom-made Valentino gown they had purchased in Rome. His mind flew back 3 hours when Eleanor had called to confirm if he would pick her up at 7:30. Her voice sounded odd on the phone, colder than usual, but he had attributed it to the stress of the preparations. Eleanor always got nervous before major social events, preoccupied with making the right impression. What she didn't know, or so he hoped, was that for the past 6 months, Marcus had built an elaborate web of lies to keep his affair with Serafina secret. Invented business trips, fake meetings, even a reserved office space where they could meet discreetly, all meticulously planned so his two lives wouldn't intersect. Until tonight, Marcus looked again at the 2 invitations. A decision needed to be made. He could continue living the lie. Accompany Eleanor to the ball as the exemplary husband all of London society knew, and meet Serafina secretly another time. Or he could finally have the courage to embrace his true feelings, even if it cost him everything he had built. His cell phone vibrated with a message from Serafina. "Can't wait to dance with you in front of everyone. It will be our first dance as a real couple." Then, almost immediately, a message arrived from Eleanor. "Darling, I changed my mind about the dress. I'm going to wear the gold one you said was your favorite. I want to be perfect for you tonight." Marcus felt a cold sweat run down his back. Eleanor never showed that kind of attention to his preferences regarding clothes. In fact, she rarely asked his opinion about anything related to her appearance. Something was different, but he couldn't pinpoint what. His thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of his chauffeur, Charles, who discreetly knocked on the door. "Mr. Harrington, the car is ready. Where are we going first?" The question echoed in the office like an ultimatum. Marcus took one last look at Eleanor's photo, then his phone, where Serafina's message still shone on the screen. Finally, his eyes rested on a third photo he kept in a locked drawer, a picture of Serafina smiling during a weekend they had spent together in Cotswolds, while Eleanor was visiting her mother in Edinburgh. "Charles," Marcus said finally, his voice firm but laden with consequence. "We are going to pick up Ms. Serafina first, then proceed to the ball." The chauffeur nodded and withdrew. Marcus remained alone for a few more minutes, knowing he was about to cross a line he might never be able to return from. But for the first time in months, he felt truly alive. He had no idea that Eleanor had found out about Serafina 3 weeks ago, thanks to a private investigator hired to confirm her suspicions. He also didn't know that his wife had spent the last few days meticulously planning her own strategy for the night of the ball. And he certainly didn't imagine that at that exact moment, Eleanor was in her own car, following a carefully calculated route that would ensure she arrived at the ball just minutes after him and his companion. The game had begun, and all the players were positioning themselves on the board. Audience question. Do you think a betrayal like this can be forgiven? Comment your opinion below. The public unveiling. The main ballroom of the Langham Hotel had never looked so dazzling. Austrian crystal chandeliers hung from the ornate ceiling, casting golden reflections over tables draped with French silk tablecloths. Over 300 guests circulated, a parade of designer gowns and impeccable tuxedos, while a chamber orchestra performed classic waltzes. Marcus adjusted his shirt cuff for the 10th time in 5 minutes. Beside him, Serafina radiated elegance in a stunning navy blue dress that subtly hugged her curves, the neckline discreet but daring enough to draw admiring glances. Her brown hair was swept up in a sophisticated chignon, highlighting the diamond necklace he had given her the month before. "You're nervous," she observed, gently touching his arm. "Relax, my love. This is our night." Marcus forced a smile. Since their arrival 20 minutes ago, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched more closely than normal. Several acquaintances had approached to greet them, and while they maintained the usual cordiality, Marcus perceived a speculative gleam in their eyes. Eleanor's absence was being noted. "Mr. Harrington." The crisp voice of Martha Silvera, one of the event organizers, and a distant cousin of Eleanor's, cut through the air. She approached with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "What a surprise to see you here with such a young and charming companion, Martha," Marcus replied with practiced diplomacy. "I'd like you to meet Serafina Hayes, head of marketing for Carver & Associates. Serafina, this is Martha Silvera, one of the pillars of our charity society. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Silvera." Serafina extended her hand with grace, but Marcus noticed the almost imperceptible tension in her voice. "The pleasure is mine, dear." Martha shook the offered hand, her eyes scanning Serafina from head to toe. "And Eleanor? She's not coming tonight? What a shame. She adores this event. In fact, she suggested this year's theme." "Eleanor is indisposed," Marcus lied easily, a skill he had perfected in recent months. "A terrible cold. She insisted I come anyway as we are the main sponsors." "Ah, what a genuine pity," Martha murmured, but her tone suggested anything but pity. "Well, I hope she recovers quickly. Do give her our best, won't you?" After Martha walked away, Serafina turned to Marcus with a worried expression. "She knows," she whispered, by the way she looked at me. "Marcus, I have the distinct impression that everyone here knows." "You're imagining things," he countered, but his own confidence was wavering. "Let's dance. That will help you relax." The dance floor was moderately full, couples twirling in an elegant waltz. Marcus led Serafina to the center, and she surrendered to the music with a natural grace that caused several couples to pause and admire them. For a moment, Marcus allowed himself to forget his worries and simply enjoy the feeling of holding Serafina publicly. It was then that he saw her. Eleanor was standing at the main entrance of the ballroom, conversing with the maitre d'. She wore a gold gown that Marcus did not recognize. Not the Valentino she had mentioned, but something new, more daring, that enhanced her still slender figure at 48. Her blonde hair was loose, falling in soft waves over her shoulders, and she wore the family jewels, the diamond tiara that had belonged to the Silvera women for 3 generations. But what struck Marcus most was her posture. Eleanor did not look like the betrayed, humiliated wife he had imagined. On the contrary, she radiated an almost regal confidence, as if she were the true hostess of the event. "What is it?" Serafina asked, feeling him stiffen during the dance. "Nothing," he muttered, trying to keep Eleanor in his field of vision without being obvious. "Keep dancing." Eleanor finished her conversation with the maitre d' and began to walk through the ballroom. She was not alone. A tall, silver-haired man in an impeccable tuxedo accompanied her. Marcus instantly recognized him. Dr. Alistair Montgomery, one of the city's most respected attorneys, and, coincidentally, a specialist in corporate law. Marcus's stomach clenched. Why would Eleanor be accompanied by Montgomery? And why did she look so triumphant? The music came to an end, and Marcus guided Serafina off the floor. He needed fresh air to think clearly. But before they could head to the terrace, Eleanor appeared before them like a golden apparition. "Marcus, darling." Her voice was melodious, almost cheerful. "What a surprise to find you here." The shock Marcus felt was like a punch to the gut. There was his wife, elegant and smiling, while he stood accompanied by his mistress in front of 300 people from the London elite. "Eleanor," he managed to stammer, "I thought you said you were ill." "Ah, yes," she laughed, a crystalline sound that drew the attention of several nearby people. "Fortunately, I recovered in time. I couldn't miss the ball, especially not tonight." She turned to Serafina with a radiant smile. "And you must be Serafina Hayes. I've heard so much about you." Serafina visibly paled. "Mrs. Harrington, please call me Eleanor," she interrupted kindly. "After all, we're practically intimate, aren't we? Marcus tells me everything about your work meetings." The double entendre was unmistakable, but delivered with such elegance that no one else, besides the three of them, could have noticed. Marcus felt cold sweat trickle down his back. "Eleanor, can we speak privately?" he urgently whispered. "Later, darling. It wouldn't be appropriate to abandon our guest right now." She turned back to Serafina. "You look beautiful, dear. That dress is a unique piece. I recognize Madame Dubois's work. Marcus has impeccable taste in gifts." Serafina unconsciously touched the diamond necklace around her neck, and Marcus realized with horror that Eleanor had noticed the gesture. "Ah, and that necklace," Eleanor continued, her voice still sweet as honey. "It's absolutely stunning. It must have cost quite a lot. Marcus was always generous with his special collaborators." At that moment, Dr. Montgomery approached the group. "Eleanor, dear, forgive the interruption." He offered a cordial smile to Marcus and Serafina. "Marcus, a pleasure to see you. And you must be Ms. Hayes, about whom we've heard so much." "Heard so much?" Marcus repeated, his voice sounding strange even to him. "Oh, yes," Montgomery smiled. "Eleanor told me about the innovations you're implementing at the company. Very interesting, I must say." Marcus looked from Montgomery to Eleanor, trying to decipher what was happening. His wife maintained a serene, almost innocent expression, but he knew that glint in her eyes. It was the same glint she had when she secured an advantageous bid at an art auction. "Well," Eleanor announced suddenly, "I think it's time we did what we came here to do." "What you came here to do?" Serafina asked, her voice barely a whisper. Eleanor smiled, and for the first time that night, Marcus saw a flash of the woman he had married 22 years ago. Determined, intelligent, and utterly ruthless at when necessary. "Why don't we find out together?" Eleanor made a discreet signal to the maitre d', who immediately headed to the stage where the orchestra was playing. The sound of the instruments gradually ceased, and all conversations in the room quieted. The maitre d' delicately tapped a crystal glass, drawing general attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice resonated through the sound system, "we have the pleasure of inviting Mrs. Eleanor Silvera Harrington to the stage for a few special words." Marcus's blood ran cold. Eleanor never gave speeches at social events. She always left that part to him or other organizers. "Excuse me," Eleanor said sweetly, touching Marcus's arm. "Duty calls." She walked toward the stage with the grace of a queen, leaving Marcus, Serafina, and Montgomery in a tense silence. Around them, guests positioned themselves for a better view of the stage. The reckoning on the stage. Eleanor delicately adjusted the microphone and smiled at the audience. The spotlight made her diamond tiara sparkle like stars. "Good evening, friends." Her voice was clear and confident. "First of all, I would like to thank you all for being here today, contributing to a cause as noble as the Hope Foundation. Polite applause resonated through the ballroom. As many of you know, Eleanor continued, my family has a long tradition of philanthropy in this city, and tonight, I would like to announce a new chapter in that tradition. Marcus felt his legs tremble. Whatever Eleanor was planning, he was sure it wouldn't be good for him. Starting today, Eleanor announced, her voice gaining strength, I will personally assume the presidency of the Hope Foundation. And to finance our new projects, I will have the pleasure of making the largest individual donation in the foundation's history. Murmurs of admiration spread through the audience. 50 million pounds, Eleanor declared, and the room erupted in enthusiastic applause. Marcus felt as if he had been struck by lightning. 50 million pounds was virtually their entire joint account for personal investments. How could she access that amount without his signature? And now, Eleanor continued, as the applause subsided, I would like to invite a very special person to join me on the stage, a person who has been instrumental in certain recent changes in my life. Serafina Hayes, would you please come up here? The entire ballroom turned to look in the direction where Marcus and Serafina were standing. Serafina was white as a ghost, her hands visibly shaking. Go, Marcus urgently whispered. We have no choice. With faltering steps, Serafina walked toward the stage under the curious gazes of the entire London elite. Marcus remained where he was, feeling as if he were witnessing a car crash in slow motion. Eleanor reached out to help Serafina onto the stage. Her smile never wavered. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced, I'd like you to meet Serafina Hayes, an extraordinary woman who changed my perspective on many things. Marcus closed his eyes, bracing himself for the worst. Beside him, Dr. Montgomery watched the scene with professional interest. You see, Eleanor continued, Serafina taught me a very valuable lesson about the importance of honesty in relationships. And that is why tonight I decided to be completely honest with all of you about some important changes in my life. The room was in absolute silence, every person hanging on her every word. After 22 years of marriage, Eleanor announced in a clear, firm voice, I am divorcing my husband, Marcus Harrington. The impact was immediate. Gasps of astonishment echoed through the room, and several people turned to look directly at Marcus. He felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath his feet, but Eleanor wasn't finished. And also tonight, she continued, I would like to announce that as part of the divorce settlement, which has already been formalized, I will assume total control of Harrington and Associates, as I possess, through my family holding, 65% of the company's shares. Marcus's world completely fell apart. 65%. That was impossible. He owned, as some of you may not know, Eleanor calmly explained, over the past 6 months, I discreetly acquired the employee shares, in addition to an extra package my husband had inadvertently placed as collateral for some undeclared personal loans. Marcus remembered with horror the loans he had taken out to maintain his secret apartment and fund his expensive gifts for Serafina, loans he had guaranteed with his own company shares, thinking he could pay them off quickly. But don't worry, Eleanor smiled radiantly at the stunned audience. The company will continue to operate normally under new management, and I am sure you will all understand that this was a very difficult but necessary decision for my emotional well-being. She turned to Serafina, who was standing beside her like a marble statue. And now, Serafina, I'd like you to say a few words to our guests. After all, you played such an important role in this revelation. The silence in the room was deafening. 300 members of the London elite seemed to have forgotten how to breathe, their eyes fixed on the drama unfolding on the stage. Serafina was immobile, as if turned to stone, while Eleanor maintained her serene smile, waiting for a response. Serafina began, her voice barely leaving her throat. The microphone caught the fragile sound and amplified it throughout the room. I don't know what to say. Oh, darling, Eleanor replied with venomous sweetness. I'm sure you'll find the right words After all, you were always so eloquent in your private messages. Marcus felt the blood drain completely from his face. Private messages. Eleanor knew about the messages. He looked around desperately, searching for an exit, but he was surrounded by familiar faces watching him with a mixture of shock, morbid curiosity, and thinly veiled pleasure at another's misfortune. "Eleanor, no!" Marcus's voice echoed through the room, louder than he intended. All eyes turned toward him, and he felt as if he were naked before the crowd. "Ah, Marcus," Eleanor greeted him cheerfully. "How good that you spoke up. Why don't you come up here too? After all, this is a family moment." The last thing Marcus wanted was to step onto that stage, but the social pressure was overwhelming. Hundreds of eyes watched him, awaiting his next move. With steps that felt like they were sinking in mud, he walked toward the stage. When he reached Eleanor and Serafina's side, he could see up close the complete transformation of his wife. The woman he had known for over 2 decades had disappeared, replaced by someone cold, calculating, and utterly unforgiving. "Perfect," Eleanor murmured to him before turning back to the public. "Now we have all the main characters gathered for the finale of our little play." She returned her attention to her phone. "Let's see. Here is a particularly interesting message sent last week. My love, I can't wait to be rid of this marriage charade. Eleanor is just an obstacle between us and our happiness. Soon we'll be free to live our love openly." The room erupted in stifled murmurs. Marcus closed his eyes, wishing the earth would open up and swallow him. "And here," Eleanor continued mercilessly, "we have an equally touching response from Ms. Hayes. Marcus, you are the man of my dreams. I can't stand having to hide anymore. When you finally get rid of that cold, calculating woman, we can be truly happy." Serafina let out an audible sob. Tears began to stream down her face, ruining her carefully applied makeup. "Cold, calculating woman," Eleanor repeated, savoring every word. "Interesting description, considering that cold, calculating woman built half the business empire you two were so eager to enjoy." Dr. Montgomery, who had remained discreetly at the foot of the stage, chose this moment to speak up. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his professional voice cutting the tension. "I apologize for the interruption, but perhaps it would be appropriate to clarify some legal aspects of the situation." Eleanor nodded gracefully. "Please, Doctor, I believe our guests would be interested in the technical details." Montgomery stepped onto the stage and approached the microphone. "As Mrs. Eleanor Harrington's attorney, I can confirm that all legal proceedings were duly formalized this afternoon at the High Court. The divorce petition includes the division of assets under the partial community regime, in addition to the dissolution of the corporate partnership." He paused, allowing the information to be absorbed by the audience. "Furthermore," he continued, "due to certain fiscal irregularities discovered in Mr. Harrington's personal accounts, including undeclared loans and the misuse of corporate resources for personal ends, Her Majesty's Revenue and Customs, HMRC, will be notified on Monday for a full audit." Marcus's world crumbled completely. Fiscal irregularities, corporate resources. He had been extremely careful to keep his extramarital activities separate from the company's finances. Or so he thought. "Dr. Montgomery," Marcus managed to say, his voice coming out as a croak, "may I know specifically which irregularities you are referring to?" Montgomery smiled coldly. "Of course, Mr. Harrington. I am referring to the £200,000 transferred from the corporate account to fund the apartment on Sloane Street, registered in the name of a shell company. Also, the undeclared expenses for jewelry, travel, and other gifts acquired with corporate cards for clearly personal purposes." Marcus felt his legs weaken. How had Eleanor discovered the apartment? He had been meticulous in concealing that property using an offshore company he had created years ago for other investments. In addition, Montgomery continued inexorably, There is the matter of the fraudulent contracts with Carver and Associates, where fictitious consulting services were invoiced to justify the transfer of resources to personal accounts. Serafina paled even more, if that were possible. "What contracts?" she whispered. "Oh dear." Eleanor addressed her with false compassion. "Didn't you know? Your beloved Marcus created fake contracts between his company and yours to justify the payment of over £500,000 over the past 6 months. Money that was, coincidentally, used to fund the lavish lifestyle you two enjoyed." "That's a lie!" Marcus finally exploded, finding his voice. "Those contracts were legitimate. Serafina provided real consulting services." "Ah, yes," Eleanor laughed, a sound that chilled the blood of everyone in the room. "Consulting services, is that what they call it now?" She returned to her phone and began scrolling the screen. "How interesting. Here's a message from you, Marcus. My love, the £50,000 consulting contract has been approved. Now we can take that trip to Paris you wanted." And Ms. Hayes's reply, "Marcus, you're perfect. I can't wait to celebrate in our special apartment." Eleanor's cruelty transformed Marcus's anger into panic. If Eleanor had intercepted his messages, she knew everything. Every meeting, every law, every intimate moment he had shared with Serafina. "How?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "How did you find out, Eleanor?" She smiled, and for the first time that night, her smile seemed genuine. "Oh, Marcus, did you truly believe I was the complacent, clueless wife I pretended to be? I knew something was wrong months ago. Your constant absences, your increasingly elaborate lies, the inexplicable expenses." She walked around him like a predator, circling its prey. "Then I hired a private investigator, and what interesting discoveries he made. Not just your affair with Ms. Hayes, but also your creative interpretations of tax law." Marcus looked desperately at Serafina, seeking some kind of support or solidarity. But she was clearly in shock. Tears flowed freely down her face. "Eleanor," he attempted one last strategy. "We can resolve this privately. There's no need to involve all these people." "All these people?" Eleanor looked around the room as if only now remembering the audience. "Oh, but Marcus, these people are our family, our friends, our business partners. They have the right to know what kind of man you truly are." Dr. Montgomery discreetly cleared his throat. "Mrs. Harrington, perhaps it would be appropriate to mention the amicable separation agreement we offered Mr. Harrington." "Ah, yes." Eleanor nodded. "How forgetful of me. Marcus, even after all these unpleasant revelations, I am still willing to be generous." She turned to him, her expression becoming almost maternal. "You can keep 10% of the company, enough for a comfortable retirement. You can also keep the beach house and the apartment where you were consulting with Ms. Hayes." "And in exchange?" Marcus asked, though he already feared the answer. "In exchange," Eleanor replied softly, "you will sign a full confession regarding the fiscal irregularities, taking sole responsibility. You will also agree never to get involved in the Silvera family's businesses again, nor attempt to contact any member of our family. And if I refuse?" Eleanor's smile turned glacial. "Then, my dear, you will spend the next 5 to 10 years explaining your creative actions to HMRC and the Crown Prosecution Service. And Ms. Hayes will have to explain her involvement in the fraudulent contracts." Serafina sobbed audibly. "I didn't know," she said, her voice breaking. "I swear I didn't know the contracts were fake." "Oh, darling," Eleanor addressed her with a compassion that seemed almost sincere. "I believe you. That's why I'm offering you a chance to redeem yourself." "What chance?" Serafina asked, clinging to any hope. "Can you testify about Marcus's involvement in the creation of the fraudulent contracts? In exchange, your company will receive full immunity, and you can continue your career without major problems." "No!" Marcus exploded. "Serafina, don't listen to her. We can fight this together." Serafina looked from Marcus to Eleanor, and then to the crowd of faces watching them. Finally, Her eyes rested on Dr. Montgomery. "If I testify," she asked hesitantly, "what will happen to Marcus?" "That will depend on him," Montgomery replied diplomatically. "If he accepts the agreement, the consequences will be minimized. If he decides to fight—" He left the sentence hanging, but the implication was clear. Eleanor returned to the microphone, addressing the audience once more. "Friends," she said, her voice returning to a cheerful, confident tone, "I know tonight brought some unexpected revelations, but I want you to know that life goes on, and it goes on very positively." She paused, allowing the suspense to build. "I'd like to announce that starting next week, Harrington and Associates will be renamed Silvera Holdings, returning to its family roots. I am very excited to work with you all in building an even more prosperous future." Hesitant applause began to resonate through the room. The London elite was clearly divided between shock and admiration for the masterful way Eleanor had orchestrated the entire situation. "And now," Eleanor announced, "I believe our special guests would like to retire to discuss the details of the proposed agreements." It was a polite, but unequivocal, dismissal. Marcus looked one last time at the crowd of familiar faces, knowing that his life, as he knew it, had ended tonight. Some looked at him with pity, others with curiosity, but most simply seemed relieved not to be in his place. "Come," he said to Serafina, offering his arm. It was the least he could do after dragging her into this catastrophe. As they descended from the stage, Dr. Montgomery discreetly followed them. "A private room is reserved for our conversation," he informed them. "I suggest we use the rest of the night to resolve all pending issues." As they left the main ballroom, Marcus heard Eleanor resume the microphone, and her voice resonated after them. "How about we return to the celebrations? The orchestra will offer us a waltz, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of this memorable evening." The music resumed, and the murmur of conversations gradually returned to the room. The London elite had witnessed one of the most spectacular scandals in their history, and could now enjoy the pleasure of analyzing it in detail over the next few months. Walking through the gilded corridors of the hotel, Marcus realized that his life had been completely destroyed and rebuilt in the space of 30 minutes, and the architect of his ruin was back on the stage, dancing gracefully with the guests, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Eleanor Silvera Harrington had played the final game, and she had won, absolutely. And if you love seeing the tables turn, please like and share this story. Subscribe for more true tales of triumph, the aftermath, and final victory. The private room at the Langham Hotel was decorated with the same discreet luxury that characterized the entire establishment. Italian leather armchairs surrounded a polished mahogany table, where Dr. Montgomery had carefully arranged a stack of legal documents. A coffee and Scotch whiskey service waited on a side table, though no one showed an appetite for anything. Marcus sank into one of the armchairs, still trying to process the magnitude of what had just happened. Beside him, Serafina cried silently, her navy blue dress now stained by the tears running down her makeup. Dr. Montgomery meticulously organized the papers, occasionally consulting his tablet. "Well," Montgomery began, his professional voice cutting through the heavy silence, "I suggest we review the terms of the proposed agreement before any decisions are made." "Agreement!" Marcus finally exploded, finding his voice. "This isn't an agreement, it's an assault! Eleanor orchestrated all of this. She set a trap for me." Montgomery looked at him with the patience of someone used to dealing with clients in denial. "Mr. Harrington, with all due respect, your wife merely utilized information that you yourself provided through your actions. The fraudulent contracts, the undeclared loans, the misuse of corporate resources. All of that is documented." He opened a folder and spread several photographs on the table. Marcus instantly recognized the images. He and Serafina entering the Sloane Street apartment, dining at expensive restaurants, shopping at luxury boutiques. Her private investigator was very thorough, Montgomery continued. 3 months of surveillance yielded more than enough evidence to support all the accusations. 3 months? Serafina lifted her head, her smeared makeup giving her a ghostly appearance. She knew 3 months ago? Indeed. Montgomery consulted his notes. Mrs. Harrington's first suspicions arose about 5 months ago, when she noticed discrepancies in the corporate accounts. The formal investigation began 3 months ago. Marcus felt a fresh wave of nausea. 5 months? But that means, Montgomery confirmed. She knew about your relationship practically from the beginning. And all that time, she was patiently collecting evidence and planning her legal strategy. My God, Serafina whispered. All those family dinners, those cordial conversations when we met at events. She was pretending the whole time. Not exactly pretending. A new voice resonated from the room's entrance. Eleanor appeared in the doorway, still radiant in her gold dress, but now without the diamond tiara. I was observing, studying, learning. She entered the room with the confidence of someone holding all the cards. Eleanor, Marcus stood up, a last spark of his former authority shining in his eyes. We need to talk alone. We have nothing left to talk about alone, Marcus, she replied coldly, settling gracefully into the armchair opposite him. 22 years of marriage ended the moment you decided I was just an obstacle to your happiness. You heard the entire conversation? Serafina said. Not a question, but a shocked realization. Eleanor smiled, and for the first time that night, she seemed genuinely amused. Darling, I didn't just hear the conversations. I have audio recordings, photographs, bank statements, credit card records, and even some very intimate text messages. She gestured to Montgomery, who opened a second folder, all meticulously cataloged and authenticated. Sufficient to support not only the divorce, Eleanor continued, but also criminal charges of misappropriation and tax fraud. Criminal charges? Marcus paled. Eleanor, you can't be serious. Oh, but I am entirely serious, she replied, her voice taking on a coldness he had never heard before. You stole money from our company, Marcus. You created fake contracts. You used corporate resources to fund your extramarital life, and on top of that, you declared personal expenses as business expenses to lower taxes. She leaned forward, her eyes fixed on his. In other words, you weren't just an unfaithful husband. You were a criminal. Montgomery diplomatically cleared his throat. Perhaps it would be appropriate to review the options available to Mr. Harrington. Please, Eleanor gestured gracefully. After all, I am still a reasonable woman. Montgomery arranged the documents in front of him. Option 1. Mr. Harrington accepts the proposed divorce agreement, confesses to the fiscal irregularities, and agrees to testify about the methods used to conceal the diverted resources. In exchange, he will receive 10% of the company, plus the aforementioned properties, and avoid any criminal prosecution. And option 2? Marcus asked, though he already feared the answer. Option 2. Mr. Harrington rejects the agreement. In that case, all evidence will be sent to HMRC and the Crown Prosecution Service. The divorce will be contentious, likely resulting in the total loss of all marital assets. And there is a significant probability of imprisonment. And me? Serafina asked. Her voice trembling. Eleanor turned to her, and for a moment her expression softened slightly. As for you, dear, I recognize that you were more a victim of Marcus's manipulations than a conscious conspirator. Manipulations? Marcus exploded. Serafina knew exactly what she was doing. She knew. Eleanor raised an eyebrow. Ms. Hayes, did you know Marcus was married when you started the relationship? I did, Serafina admitted hesitantly. And did you know he was using company resources to fund your meetings? No. Serafina shook her head vigorously. He said the money came from personal investments and the consulting contracts your company signed with Harrington and Associates. He said they were legitimate, that there was real consulting work to be done. Eleanor nodded, as if her suspicions had been confirmed. Exactly what I thought. Marcus, you didn't just deceive me. You also deceived this poor girl. Poor girl, Marcus laughed bitterly. Eleanor, she knew I was married. She actively participated in the affair. She participated in an extramarital relationship, yes, Eleanor agreed. But she did not consciously participate in fiscal crimes. There is a significant difference. Montgomery consulted his documents again. The proposal for Ms. Hayes is as follows. In exchange for her testimony on how Marcus presented the consulting contracts to her, her company will receive full immunity from any investigation. Furthermore, Silvera Holdings will be willing to consider legitimate consulting contracts in the future. Serafina looked from Montgomery to Eleanor, then to Marcus. And if I refuse? Then, Eleanor replied softly, you will be considered a co-conspirator in the fiscal crimes. Your company will be investigated, and you will likely face criminal charges. The silence in the room was deafening. Marcus could hear the distant sound of music coming from the ballroom, where the party continued as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Eleanor, he finally said, his voice laden with defeat. Why are you doing this? You could have just filed for divorce. Eleanor studied him for a long moment before replying. Marcus, for the past 22 years, I dedicated my life to building something with you. Not just a marriage, but a business empire, a reputation, a position in society. She stood up and walked to the window, looking at the city lights. And then I discovered that while I was doing that, you were systematically destroying everything we built, not just betraying me emotionally, but literally stealing the money I helped earn to impress your young mistress. She turned back to him, and Marcus saw tears glistening in her eyes for the first time that night. You turned our marriage into a lie, our company into a resource source for your affair, and on top of that, you made me a joke to all of London society. And you, he interrupted her, don't you regret it? Didn't you know what you were doing? Was it just a mistake? She shook her head sadly. Marcus, you meticulously planned every lie, every money diversion, every secret meeting. And all that time you came home and pretended to be a loving husband. I still love you, he said desperately. Eleanor laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. Love, Marcus. You didn't even respect me enough to be honest with me. How can you talk about love? She returned to her armchair and sat down elegantly. No, my dear. What you felt for me was convenience. I was useful for your career, your social standing, your financial stability. But when you found something more exciting, you didn't hesitate to discard me. That's not true. Marcus protested, but his words sounded weak even to him. Isn't it? Eleanor opened her purse and took out her phone again. Here's a message you sent Serafina last week. I can't wait to be rid of Eleanor permanently. She's like dead weight in my life. The silence that followed was absolute. Serafina looked at Marcus with growing horror, as if seeing him for the first time. Did you really write that? She whispered. Marcus couldn't find words to respond. The message was true, written during a moment of particular frustration with Eleanor, but hearing the words repeated aloud made them cruel and despicable. I understand, Eleanor said softly, putting away her phone. I believe I have made my position quite clear. Montgomery consulted his watch. I suggest you make a decision tonight. The agreements need to be signed no later than noon tomorrow for the proposed terms to hold. And if we need more time to think? Serafina asked. Then, Eleanor replied, the terms will become progressively less favorable. As of noon tomorrow, the offer of immunity for Ms. Hayes will be withdrawn. On Monday, the settlement offer for Marcus will also be withdrawn. You want to force us to decide under pressure, Marcus accused her. No, Marcus, Eleanor corrected calmly. I am offering you the chance to minimize the consequences of your actions. But my patience and my generosity have limits. She stood up again, smoothing her gold dress. I will give you 30 minutes to discuss between yourselves. Dr. Montgomery will stay here to clarify any doubts regarding the legal aspects. Walking toward the door, she stopped and turned one last time. And Marcus, regardless of your decision tonight, our marriage is over. The only question is whether you prefer to leave this situation as a man who at least tried to do the right thing in the end, or as a criminal who tried to fight against incontestable evidence. She left the room, leaving behind the soft sound of her dress rustling in the marble corridor. Marcus slumped back into the armchair, finally grasping the full magnitude of his situation. Eleanor hadn't just discovered his betrayal. She had transformed that discovery into a masterpiece of calculated revenge. And now, he and Serafina had 30 minutes to decide how they wanted their lives to be destroyed. Action required. Do you think this is the perfect revenge? Share your opinion and subscribe to see the final chapter. The Legacy of Triumph. 6 months after the gala ball, which became a legend among the London high society, the 22nd floor office had a new occupant. Eleanor Silvera sat behind the same mahogany desk that once belonged to Marcus, but the atmosphere had been completely transformed. The walls now displayed contemporary British art instead of masculine corporate trophies, and large arrangements of fresh flowers brought life and color to the space. She reviewed the quarterly reports for the now renamed Silvera Holdings, satisfied with the numbers she saw. The company had not only recovered from the scandal, but was thriving under her new leadership. The transition had been surprisingly smooth, primarily because most clients and business partners had long considered her the true force behind the company's success. A gentle knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Marcia, her new executive assistant, entered with a slightly worried expression. "Mrs. Silvera, there is a person here who would like to speak with you. She said she doesn't have an appointment, but it's important. It's Serafina Hayes." Eleanor looked up from the documents, genuinely surprised. In the 6 months since the night of the ball, she had had minimal contact with Serafina, primarily through lawyers during the legal proceedings that followed. "Show her in," Eleanor decided, curious about what could have brought her ex-husband's former mistress here. Serafina entered the office with visible hesitation. She was noticeably thinner, her hair cut in a more conservative style, and she wore a simple business suit that contrasted sharply with the daring elegance Eleanor remembered from the night of the ball. "Eleanor," she began, then corrected herself. "Mrs. Silvera, thank you for receiving me. Please, sit down." Eleanor gestured to one of the armchairs in front of her desk. "Can I offer you coffee? Water?" "Coffee would be great, thank you." Eleanor placed the order with Marcia, who discreetly withdrew. An uncomfortable silence settled between the two women until the coffee arrived. "Well," Eleanor finally said, "I imagine you didn't come here just for a social visit." Serafina took a deep breath, as if preparing herself for something difficult. "I came to thank you," she said, her words coming out hurriedly. "I know it may sound strange, but I need to thank you for what you did that night." Eleanor raised an eyebrow, genuinely taken aback. "Thank me, Serafina? I practically destroyed your reputation publicly and forced you to testify against Marcus." "You saved me," Serafina corrected, her words gaining strength. "In the last 6 months, I've had time to understand what really happened. Marcus wasn't just cheating on me. He was manipulating me, using me, and I was too young and stupid to realize it." She paused to take a sip of coffee, her hands shaking slightly. "When I started to truly analyze our relationship, I realized how many lies he had told me. Not just about you, but about everything. The consulting contracts I thought were legitimate. The expensive gifts he said came from his personal investments. Even the things he told me about his feelings." Serafina looked directly at Eleanor for the first time since she had entered. "After everything ended, I found old messages from him on my phone, messages I had forgotten. In one of them, he said you were just a phase he needed to get over, that he had never truly loved you. In another, he talked about how easy it was to manipulate emotional women like me. Eleanor felt a pang of what might have been pity. No, Serafina continued with determination. I need to say this. During the 6 months our relationship lasted, I thought I was living a grand love story. I thought Marcus had found something in me that he couldn't find in you. But the truth is, he was simply bored, and I was convenient. She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. When you revealed everything that night, I felt humiliated, betrayed, destroyed. But I also felt liberated, because I could finally see Marcus for who he really was. And who was he? Really? Eleanor asked softly. A man who didn't respect any of the women in his life, Serafina replied without hesitation. He lied to you for months. He stole money from the company you built together, and he used me as a fantasy to escape his responsibilities. She turned back to Eleanor. You, on the other hand, when you discovered what was happening, didn't just take revenge out of rage. You protected yourself. You protected your wealth. And strangely, you protected me too. How did I protect you? By offering me an out, Serafina explained. You could have destroyed me completely, included me in the criminal charges, ruined my career. Instead, you gave me a chance to tell the truth and start over. Eleanor studied the younger woman's face, looking for signs of manipulation or falsehood, but finding only a weary sincerity. And how is your life now? She asked. Different. Serafina smiled for the first time since she had entered. Very different. I had to rebuild my professional reputation from scratch. Some clients left when the scandal broke, but others respected my honesty in cooperating with the investigations. She returned to the armchair. I also started therapy. I needed to understand how I had allowed myself to be so completely deceived. And well, I learned a lot about myself. Like what? Like confusing excitement with love, secrets with intimacy, expensive gifts with genuine affection, Serafina replied with brutal honesty. Marcus made me feel special, but it was the specialty of being a secret, of being a conquest. It was never about loving me for who I truly am. Eleanor nodded slowly. She recognized those feelings, albeit from a different perspective. And Marcus? She asked. Have you heard anything from him? Serafina shook her head. He tried to contact me several times in the early months, but I didn't respond. I heard he moved to Birmingham, that he's trying to start over there, but I don't know the details, and I prefer it that way. Did he sign the agreement? Eleanor already knew the answer, but she wanted to hear Serafina's perspective. Yes, he signed it the morning after the ball. I think he finally realized he had no real choice. Serafina hesitated. Eleanor, can I ask you something? Of course. You always knew he didn't really love me, didn't you? Even that night, when it seemed like he had chosen me to accompany him to the ball instead of you? Eleanor considered the question carefully before answering. Serafina, over 22 years of marriage, I learned to read Marcus very well, and one thing I always knew about him is that he loved himself above all else. When I found out about you two, my first reaction was pain and anger. But when I started investigating further, I realized you weren't a rival. You were just another object he wanted to possess. How can you be so sure? Because, Eleanor explained kindly, if Marcus truly loved you, he would have left our marriage honestly. He would have divided the assets according to the law, faced the social consequences, and built a new life with you. Instead, he tried to maintain both situations, lying to both of us. Serafina slowly felt the puzzle pieces finally fitting together. You're right. Even when he said he wanted a divorce, there were always excuses to postpone it. It was always not the right time, or complications that needed to be resolved first. Exactly. Eleanor stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city. Marcus wanted to have the best of both worlds, the stability and social status of marriage with me, and the excitement of the secret affair with you. He never intended to truly choose. A comfortable silence settled between them. Eleanor studied Serafina, seeing a woman who had matured significantly in the last few months. "May I ask why you truly came here today?" Eleanor said finally. "I know it wasn't just to say thank you." Serafina smiled, a genuine smile this time. "You know me well, even without knowing me long." She took a deep breath. "I came to make you a business proposal." "A proposal? My company is growing, but I need a larger partner for some international projects. I researched Silvera Holdings, and you have exactly the expertise and resources I need." Eleanor leaned back in her chair, intrigued. "And you think I would consider doing business with you after everything that happened?" "I think you are a smart businesswoman," Serafina replied with growing confidence. "And I believe you recognize talent when you see it, regardless of personal circumstances. Continue." Serafina opened her briefcase and took out a carefully prepared presentation. "I'm specializing my company in digital marketing for firms looking to expand into international markets. In the last 6 months, I've secured 3 major clients who want to enter the European market, but I need a partner with international trade experience." She handed the documents to Eleanor. "This would be a strictly professional partnership with clear and transparent contracts. Nothing like the fake contracts Marcus created." Eleanor skimmed the documents, impressed in spite of herself by the quality of the presentation and the solidity of the numbers presented. "These results are real, completely verifiable. I can provide references from all clients, audited financial reports, everything you need." Eleanor continued studying the numbers. The proposal was genuinely solid, and Silvera Holdings had been considering expanding its digital marketing division. "Serafina," she finally said, "do you realize how strange it would be for us to work together? What would people say? They would say that 2 intelligent women overcame a difficult personal situation and found a way to create value together." Serafina replied without hesitation. "Or they would say that we are professional enough to separate business from personal matters. And if it didn't work out, if we found that we couldn't work together, then we would end the partnership professionally and move on with our lives," Serafina said simply. "But I believe we have more in common than you might imagine." "How so?" "We are both women who were underestimated by Marcus Harrington." Serafina smiled ironically. "He thought you were just a trophy wife, and that I was just a manipulable mistress. We both proved him wrong." Eleanor laughed, a genuine sound of amusement. "You have a point." She studied Serafina for a moment longer. Then she made a decision that surprised herself. "All right, I will consider your proposal, but with conditions." "What conditions?" "First, any partnership will be on a smaller scale initially. A pilot project so we can test how we work together. Agreed? Second, detailed, above-board contracts, all reviewed by independent lawyers. Absolutely. And third," Eleanor seemed to hesitate for the first time, "if we are going to work together, we need to completely resolve the past between us. No hidden resentments, no unresolved awkwardness." Serafina nodded seriously. "Eleanor, I want you to know that I never hated you, even during the relationship with Marcus. In fact, I always admired you. He talked about you constantly, your intelligence, your business acumen, your position in society. I think part of what he saw in me was a younger, less threatening version of you." "Less threatening?" "You were always his intellectual equal, capable of challenging and questioning him. I was easier to control, at least at the beginning." Serafina smiled sadly. "Ironically, that's what made our relationship less real for him." Eleanor considered those words, recognizing the truth in them. "You know, Serafina, I think you're right, that we have more in common than I thought. We both learned valuable lessons about valuing ourselves and surviving men like Marcus." "Exactly," Serafina added. Eleanor stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city she now saw with new eyes, not as Marcus Harrington's wife, but as Eleanor Silvera, a successful businesswoman in her own right. Very well, she said, turning to Serafina. We'll try this partnership, but we'll do it the right way. Thank you, Eleanor. I promise you won't regret it. I hope not. And Eleanor? Yes. The next time a man tries to tell you that you are less capable or less valuable than you really are, remember this conversation. Remember that you are strong enough to rebuild your life, smart enough to recognize your mistakes, and brave enough to try something new. Tears glistened in Serafina's eyes. Thank you, Eleanor. The same goes for you. You're not just Marcus Harrington's ex-wife. You're a force of nature all on your own. As Serafina prepared to leave, Eleanor reflected on how life had taken unexpected turns. 6 months ago, at the gala ball, she had orchestrated the public destruction of her marriage as an act of revenge. But what had emerged from the ashes of that night was something she had never anticipated, a stronger, more independent version of herself. "Ah, Serafina," she called out as the younger woman reached the door. "Yes, I think we should have lunch together next week to discuss the partnership details." "Of course," Serafina smiled. "But this time, I'm paying. After all, it will technically be a legitimate business expense." Eleanor laughed heartily, a free, genuine laugh she hadn't let out in months. "I accept." After Serafina left, Eleanor returned to her desk and looked at the framed photo she had recently placed there. A photo of herself alone, taken during a recent trip to Europe she had made to explore business opportunities. In the photo, she was genuinely smiling, free, and confident. There were no longer any photos of Marcus in her office or her home. Not out of anger, but because she had discovered she didn't need his presence, even in the form of a memory, to define herself. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. "Eleanor, Dr. Montgomery on line 1, Marcia said. "He says he has good news about the final divorce process." "Put him through." "Eleanor," Montgomery's familiar voice came through the phone. "I'm pleased to inform you that all final documents have been signed and registered. You are officially divorced and have total control of Silvera Holdings." "Thank you, Dr. Montgomery. It's been a pleasure working with you. And I can say I've rarely seen someone handle such a difficult situation with such elegance and determination." After hanging up, Eleanor allowed herself a moment of silent satisfaction. The Marcus Harrington chapter of her life was definitively closed, but unlike the bitter ending she had anticipated, she felt liberated. The woman who had entered that gala ball 6 months ago was Marcus Harrington's betrayed wife. The woman sitting in that office today was Eleanor Silvera, businesswoman, philanthropist, and architect of her own destiny. And for the first time in decades, she couldn't wait to discover what the future held. That evening, as she worked late reviewing proposals for new Silvera Holdings projects, Eleanor received a text message from an unknown number. "Eleanor, I hope you are well. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I recognize the wrong I did you, and that you were always better than I deserved. Marcus." She looked at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without replying. There was nothing more to be said between them. Instead, she opened a new document on her computer and began writing a business plan for the new partnership with Serafina Hayes. Because while the past had been about revenge and justice, the future would be about growth and possibilities. And Eleanor Silvera was ready to embrace them all. The new office of Silvera Holdings and Hayes Associates occupied 2 entire floors in one of London's most modern buildings. The partnership between Eleanor and Serafina had flourished beyond all expectations, becoming one of the most respected international marketing consultancies in the country. Eleanor was in her conference room when Serafina entered with an expression of barely concealed amusement. "You're going to laugh," Serafina announced, waving a society magazine in her hands. "About what?" "Marcus is featured in the Tatler social column. Apparently, he married a 25-year-old heiress." Eleanor raised an eyebrow. "The same pattern?" "The same pattern," Serafina agreed. But here's the interesting part. According to the magazine, the new wife has already hired a private investigator because she suspects he's having an affair. Eleanor shook her head, more with pity than satisfaction. Some men never learn. No, Serafina agreed, tossing the magazine into the rubbish bin. But some women do, and we are living proof of that. Eleanor smiled, looking out the window at the city she had conquered, not as someone's wife, but as herself. Conquering continents, the new headquarters of Silvera Holdings and Hayes Associates, a name that had swiftly become synonymous with strategic brilliance and professional ruthlessness, was a temple to modern success. The 23rd floor office, shared by Eleanor and Serafina, was designed not merely for work, but for calculated domination. 6 months had passed since the new partnership formally began. The initial pilot project, focused on launching a high-end British brand into the European luxury market, had not just succeeded, it had shattered all expectations, yielding a 400% return on investment within the first quarter. This victory silenced the last remaining skeptics in the London financial press, who had tried to frame the partnership as a mere public relations stunt, orchestrated by Eleanor. The analysts at Financial Times are calling us the unlikely architects of digital commerce, Serafina commented one afternoon, leaning against Eleanor's minimalist steel desk. She held a tablet displaying their latest market penetration report. At 33, Serafina was no longer the naive mistress. She was a sharp, seasoned executive whose confidence now stemmed from earned competence, not borrowed glamour. Her hair was now a sleek, shorter style, highlighting the intelligence in her emerald eyes. Unlikely? Eleanor mused, looking up from a contract that proposed a major expansion into the Dubai market. I find it entirely predictable. We were both motivated by something far more potent than mere profit, wouldn't you agree? Eleanor, still the picture of flawless elegance, had undergone her own quiet transformation. She wore less jewelry, relying instead on the severe cut of her clothes and the sheer power of her presence. The diamond tiara remained locked away, a symbol of a past she no longer needed to leverage. Absolutely. He underestimated your fury and my hunger, Serafina replied, a wry smile playing on her lips. It's a far better motivator than his fragile ego. Their working dynamics was a perfectly calibrated machine. Eleanor provided the deep-rooted financial power, the political access of the Silvera name, and the ice-cold strategic oversight. Serafina brought the innovative digital marketing insight, the energetic team management, and the crucial understanding of how modern consumers truly connected. They were two halves of the ultimate corporate predator. On a related note, Serafina continued, tapping the tablet screen, the Spanish expansion is ready. We just need final sign-off. The client is Molina Group, correct? Silvera Holdings is now acquiring the last outstanding assets of the former Molina Group in Spain, Eleanor corrected gently. A cleanup operation, if you will. Their primary asset is the distribution network in Valencia. Any chance of running into him? Serafina asked. Her voice deliberately neutral. Eleanor chuckled, a dry, confident sound. Marcus is currently preoccupied with his third, and increasingly impatient young wife. The last I heard from Dr. Montgomery, the legal fallout from her prenuptial agreement, which, I might add, was highly favorable to her thanks to my suggestion to her attorney, is starting to distract him significantly from business. No, Serafina, our paths will not cross. An unexpected reflection. Their conversation was interrupted by Marcia, bringing in 2 cups of Earl Grey tea. Mrs. Silvera, a personal delivery just arrived. It's an invitation. Eleanor opened the heavy cardstock envelope. It was the annual Mayfair Charity Gala, the very event where she had executed her revenge exactly 1 year prior. The sight of the logo, a stylized golden dove, brought back a wave of memories. The shock on Marcus's face, Serafina's tears. The collective gasp of the elite. The anniversary, Serafina observed, recognizing the invitation immediately. Are you going? Eleanor took a thoughtful sip of tea. Last year, I went to end a lie and start a new era. This year, I would go merely to confirm what is already known. It feels unnecessary. I think you should go, Serafina challenged softly. Not to gloat, but because the world needs to see the final chapter of the story. Last year, you were the betrayed wife seeking justice. This year, you would be the CEO, the force behind Silvera Hayes. It closes the loop. Eleanor looked at Serafina, a moment of mutual understanding passing between them that transcended their complicated history. You're right, Eleanor conceded. We'll go. Together. Just one thing, Serafina added, leaning in. Last year, I wore the blue dress he bought me. This year, I think we need a statement. Something that screams, we bought the hotel. They shared a knowing laugh. Audience question. If Eleanor and Serafina were to attend the gala, what one powerful message should they send with their presence? Comment your best idea. The defining moment. The Mayfair Charity Gala was, if possible, even more spectacular than the year before. But the true spectacle was not the crystal chandeliers or the gultla silk tablecloths. It was the arrival of Eleanor Silvera and Serafina Hayes. Eleanor wore a custom-made emerald green gown, the color of Serafina's eyes, a bold choice that drew immediate attention. Serafina, in return, wore a sharp, floor-length gown in a pale, confident gold, the color of Eleanor's triumphant dress from the previous year. They entered the ballroom side by side, radiating an easy, profound power that stemmed from billions of pounds in assets, and, more importantly, a shared dark history overcome. They were partners, allies, and friends. A flurry of greetings and respectful nods followed their path. Everyone wanted to speak to Eleanor, the celebrated CEO who had turned a scandal into a corporate coup. But it was the dynamic between the two women, the casual touches, the shared jokes, the mutual respect in their eyes, that truly captivated the room. Later that evening, after giving a brief, empowering speech about the foundation's record-breaking success under the new Silvera Holdings management, Eleanor descended from the stage. She paused next to Serafina. The loop is closed, Eleanor murmured, looking around at the deferential crowd. I feel complete. Me too, Serafina replied. The ghost of Marcus Harrington has been officially exorcised from both our careers. Suddenly, Martha Silvera, the cousin who had been so suspicious a year earlier, approached them, her eyes shining with genuine admiration. Eleanor Serafina, Martha said, her voice sincere. I must tell you, the entire city is talking. Not about the divorce anymore, but about Silvera Hayes. What you two have built out of that wreckage is simply astonishing. You have completely redefined power in this city. Eleanor smiled, a soft, true smile that only emerged when she was genuinely proud of an achievement. Thank you, Martha, Eleanor said, glancing at Serafina. It turns out that a little bit of honesty and a lot of good, legitimate business contracts can achieve far more than years of manipulation and lies. Serafina raised her champagne glass in a silent toast to the truth and their shared victory. The meaningful end. They stayed for another hour, not out of obligation, but out of genuine enjoyment of the respect they commanded. As they were leaving, standing near the entrance, Serafina leaned close to Eleanor. Do you know the real, deep meaning in all of this, Eleanor? Eleanor looked at her, ready to hear the final analysis. The real meaning is that his betrayal, which was intended to destroy us both, you emotionally, me professionally, ended up being the very thing that created us, Serafina said, her voice thoughtful. It stripped away the comfortable illusions, your illusion of a stable marriage, my illusion of a passionate love, It forced us to see the world and each other clearly. And look what we built when we stopped pretending and started doing. Eleanor reached out and squeezed Serafina's hand, a rare, genuine gesture of affection. You're right, Serafina, Eleanor agreed. The greatest revenge isn't the public downfall of your betrayer. The greatest revenge is the spectacular, undeniable triumph of the person they tried to diminish. We proved that women don't need to compete over a dishonest man. We can unite and conquer the world he failed to keep. They walked out of the opulent hotel, two figures in green and gold, not as rivals, but as architects of a formidable new destiny. The city lights of London shimmered, illuminating the path forward for the Silvera Hayes dynasty. Call to action. If you believe in powerful women supporting each other, like this story, subscribe for more inspiring narratives and tell us in the comments what you think their next international move should be. Thank you for reading.